friends. Welcome to What Matters Most with Faith Community. I'm Fawn Ellerbrook, and I am really excited to bring this episode to you wherever you're listening from today. Tabitha Caplinger sat down with her husband Brian and our friend Antwain Jackson to talk about building healthy relationships. Now, as we dig into this conversation, keep in mind that this discussion applies to all types of relationships. That's friends, marriage, family, whatever. And also all types of people, introverts and extroverts alike. They have some really great thoughts about how to be a healthy person in a relationship with others and even how to walk through seasons of loneliness. And they may or may not talk about Brian being a major fan of Celine Dion. I don't know, you're just gonna have to listen. I will say that sitting in on the recording was really fun. We laughed a lot and we all learned from each other in the process. So with that said, enjoy this episode of What Matters Most.
Now, for me, it's not necessarily, I don't have to be face to face.
Right.
It's just conversation. So for me, that's where like even video games comes into play because I don't play them by myself hardly ever. It's somebody else has to be on so I can have that interaction, that conversation, feel some semblance of a connection versus just being there by myself. If I sit all day and if I were like to be put in a room where I couldn't talk to people, I might legitimately go insane.
Wow.
Like, because of that.
Meanwhile, I would be so excited.
I'm like, this is heaven on earth.
Nobody else is here. Like when he will take the girls places and I'm home totally by myself, I'm like, this is glorious. It's so quiet. I feel the Holy Spirit speaking to me. Like, yeah. And he could go I could go 2 weeks of not doing anything people oriented.
And I can't,
and be really excited about that.
I get antsy.
I know that about you. We've been married a minute, and I understand that.
Look at that.
Pretty hot minute.
The yin and the yang.
Absolutely.
Yep. Oh, very opposite.
That's beautiful.
And a lot of things.
Then early on, it was really hard because early on, I would try to be more extroverted because I felt like if I didn't do all the people things he wanted to do, that he was bothered by it. But then I'm like a crabby, exhausted person all the time because I don't want to people. And it was probably like 10 years in before we started I don't have to go with you to all the things. Like, by all means, go. Talk to the people. Do the thing. Like, have fun with that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've really had to learn the balance of not pushing her past that because I'm the type of person I'll schedule, hey, let's go to dinner with somebody every night of the week.
Ooh-wee.
And not give that break. And she's just like, no, look, we got to limit it to maybe 2 if we're lucky.
Because I got no, I'm done.
And I guess for you, Antwain, I was thinking about this, because you're naturally introverted. Mm-hmm. And so you're drained. Mm-hmm. So how do you engage with just some of your close friends that are a part of what you do, in those moments?
Well, all of my close friends do not judge me because they don't hear from me. So this is the strangest thing. They just know it's not personal. If I don't initiate or if I don't, I never pick up the phone and call.
Okay.
Or if I'm thinking about you, I will text you. But hey, you good? Something like that. But my introvertedness just, I kind of go in my own little world, and it's my own little schedule. I'm getting up at this time, and I'm going to walk my daughter to school. Then I'm going to go to the gym. And then when I get done at the gym, then if I have to do a live, I will do the live. Or I'll get dressed and go to the church and work. Or if I'm traveling, so most of my life is scheduled, so I don't really have to talk unless it's time to talk.
That makes sense.
But all of my friends know, but if you call me, I will absolutely engage. If you text me, I will absolutely text back. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But they just know I might not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might not. And it's never personal.
No, And those are the best friends because you know that they're not going to feel bad. Mm-hmm. When my best friend in the whole world lives in Alabama, so we're long distance all the time. But she's the same way. So we can go a month and not text each other because just life and other things going on and never feel some kind of way about it.
Right.
Because we know, oh, well, you're just tired. Like, you don't have any more words, even for a text, and it's fine. Our daughter is the same way. Well, we have 2 daughters, and the oldest is a lot like him as far as being extroverted. She's shy, but she's extroverted. Mm-hmm. Our youngest is not shy at all, but is super introverted, probably more so than me at this point. Like Sundays, sitting in on 2 services on Sunday, she looks at me and goes, Mom, no more conversations. We just need to go home. And then she will go home, and if she has had to people for whatever, we had a church event, we had youth retreat, and she'll be good. Like, she will power through, but then she will come home and she will most definitely not talk to another soul in our house for 3 days straight. She will put on some headphones and grab a video game and be in her own little world and be 100% happy with that.
Isn't it strange? And not that I'm saying that my introvertedness is a weakness, but I'll just say it that isn't it strange that what people know as your strength is the thing that sometimes that can be your weakness.
That's
you know
good.
Because my life is a communicator. It is the absolute strangest oxymoron ever to have the life of a communicator. When you're standing in front of people, you're writing your thoughts, you're talking your thoughts all the time. But then when that is done, you're the absolute opposite. It's always perplexing to me about that dichotomy of that my strength is communication, but it's also my weakness.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because for me, like, I can relate to you. I'm not a phone person. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny because I love to engage. I love to have conversation. And so a lot of people would think that, hey, you call me, we're going to be on the phone for a while. Oh, no. But yeah, to me, I think there's a little bit, I feel impersonal with that. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always going to push the conversation to, hey, let's get face to face. Let's get connected to where I can see you in that regard, because I want to be able to glean that energy that you present. I feel like I have a much better understanding and read when I can see your body language and be around you. And so I think that tends for me, which is funny about relationships, I'm always going to push to find someone to connect with. Because it's funny, you talked, Tabitha, about just having that long distance friendship, which I have friends in other states, but I don't want to say they fade, but they're not as close because I don't have that personal connection where we're face to face, or we can do some things together. And so it begins, not that it fades, because I'm really, really quick to, like, I can be completely disengaged with you for months and then we connect in a moment, right, and all of a sudden it's like nothing ever changed. We're best friends again. Yeah. Everything's great. But because we're not face to face consistently, I can lose touch with that because of the energy aspect. And so it always fascinates me, because I'll sit there, of course, being in the same house as Tabitha, and I'll see them watching shows together and just texting, and I'm like, that would drive me absolutely insane. I was like, I'd just rather you come over and sit beside me and let's watch this together, or at least let's FaceTime together so I can see you. That's probably been one of the greatest inventions for me.
No, and Holly and I would be like, no, you can't. No, the FaceTime ruins it. Like, it just has to be the texting and the commentary. But anyway, so we'll jump into some conversation here. I want to start by thanking you guys for being here. And if you want, just take a minute. Let's introduce yourselves and maybe share a random fun fact so we can get to know you a little bit better.
That's always dangerous. Because now, it's not shy. So I'll start because I'm talking. I like to talk anyway, so this makes it easy. Brian Caplinger, I get the privilege of being one of the pastors on staff at Faith Community. Also am a certified Christian leadership coach. And so super excited, just to be here and have that conversation. And probably the interesting fact, and I don't know if it's necessarily something new at this point, because if you know me, you find out pretty quickly that I am completely stuck on Celine Dion. Like, she is my favorite musical
your favorite
artist.
Celine Dion song?
So it's really a rare one. Most people don't even know that she sings it, but it's called "If Walls Could Talk." And it's a pretty good song.
I thought you was going to do "The Power of Love."
They're all good.
Oh, he could belt all of them out.
Yeah, I have them
anytime.
all. Like, I mean, if you look at my playlist, I have a Celine-only
thing.
playlist on my phone. And it's just hours and hours of her, which is great. But I like the randomness of those songs.
No judgment.
All right. I don't even know where to go from there. I got
Tabitha's
nothing.
trying not to laugh.
I'm trying. Like I can't. It's my
But you
husband,
know
ladies
this.
and gentlemen.
I know.
I do know. I'm very well aware of your infatuation with
And
Celine
I'm not
Dion.
shy about it because I want to travel to Vegas and I got to see her in her live show.
Well, that's the way I am about Tracy Ellis Ross, though. Like, oh my God. Like, God, do a miracle. Like, make her see me. Make her stumble across my page. Like, let me see her at a random Walmart. Like, something.
Random Walmart.
Tracy Ellis Ross, Lord, do it for me, Jesus.
Oh my goodness. Don't even get Brian started on the time as a teenager that Celine Dion took a rose from his hand at a concert.
I'm telling
It
you.
was a moment.
And that's, in that moment, like I loved her songs. I would, and man, like, you may hate me after I say this, but I'm okay with it. Like I used to listen to her going to sleep at night. Like that was the music that was playing in the background.
Okay.
And so it was just like, it's so soothing. And then to have that moment as
Yeah.
a teenager, it just changes you. So
It does.
I wish you could see Tabitha's
Things
face
that
right
we're
now.
learning right now. And I knew all this before I married him, guys. I still said yes. And no, he does not listen to Celine Dion lullabies as he's going to sleep anymore. I just feel like that
you
needs to
think.
be put out there. Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm just fine.
as far as I know. I don't know. Moving on. So, Antwain,
My name
tell us
is
about yourself.
Antwain Jackson. I am a pastor, an author, a foodie, an urban photographer. Just love just taking pictures of random things. A dad. And my fun fact, we already kind of talked about Tracy, but since you talked about Celine, I can't talk about Tracy. Let's see here. Man, something super random.
Random fun facts are hard.
Super hard because I am the most random person ever. You would think that I wouldn't like this, and I actually like that. Or you wouldn't think that I would find that funny, and my humor is very dark. So, okay, there we go. That'll be my random fact. So,
right.
Dark
I'm
humor.
a spiritual leader, but I love dark humor. Like,
I get that.
It is absolutely my kind of funny. I don't like dry Christian jokes. If that makes sense. Don't judge me. You didn't judge him for Celine Dion.
I won't.
Okay.
I appreciate the dark humor.
I'm a dark humor person. It just, if it's funny, I'm gonna be cackling, and it just, I shouldn't be.
there's no shame.
No.
No shame.
I feel okay
No.
now.
And I'm Tabitha. I'm Brian's wife, as we've established, and also one of the pastors at Faith Community, and an author, and a homeschool mom. And I don't know what else. We're getting a puppy. That's my random fun fact, because I'm being super extra about this puppy, like super extra about it.
You have to be.
I apparently I do. I'm treating this as though we are adopting another child, and all the preparation. It's really, and I've had dogs before. It's not like this is our first dog, but there were extenuating circumstances.
That's true. And we don't need to go into
We don't.
that.
It's sad. It'll make the people sad. We've had a lot of laughing, but I'm in like a week from the recording of this podcast, we're getting a puppy. And no, I don't know its name yet because I have a list of like 15 names.
Celine.
Hey, I'd be okay with that. But,
We're not naming
they're
the
not
puppy
going that
Celine.
route.
No.
So,
It's cute that everyone else in my house thinks that they have a say in the name of the puppy. Like, I like to make them feel involved in the decision, but when it comes down to it, I'm naming the puppy, and nobody else's opinion really is going to matter a whole lot
yeah,
to
and
me.
then she's going to be mad because the puppy's going to love me more than her.
Oh.
But
That's true. It happens with every animal in our house, that they all come to love him more, and he does not love any of them as much as the rest of us do.
Yeah,
It's called
So-
balance.
absolutely.
Apparently, I don't know. He puts out some vibes or something. He bribes them. I don't know what he does. But so we're talking about relationships today, and I feel like we've hit some topics with Celine Dion, things that come up in marriage. And so to kind of get the ball rolling, I think just establishing kind of a baseline about why are relationships important? Feels like a very broad, very deep question, but I think that kind of is a good starting place. Why are relationships important?
Man, I mean, it is a good question, but I think it's got a real basic answer that I think at the core of all of us we know. I mean, the reality is simply this. All of us want to be loved and accepted, regardless of where we're at. And I think relationships plays big into that because you can't be loved and accepted if you don't have people in your life, if you don't invite them into your life, or you're not intentionally trying to find those relationships. I think where it gets super murky in that is we don't really know what love and acceptance fully is at times when we jump into our relationships. And so that's where I think we get ourselves into trouble very, very quickly when it comes to relationships. But at the core, I think it's really just that. I think relationships are vital because, one, they help us grow. They help us discover really who we are in the process of just life, and whether it's spiritual or not. You know, those relationships are valuable. And the simple reality is simply this. You're never going to be able to get away from relationships, no matter where you're at in life, whether it's with work, family, marriage, if that's in the cards for you or not, whatever the case may be, kids, involvement, volunteer work, whatever the case is, relationships play that part.
Yeah, that's good.
I think relationships are valuable because they basically show you or give you what's the best way to say this? You can't say that you love God or know God whom you've never seen and not know the people and love the people who you see every single day.
Yeah, that's good.
So for me, people in relationships teach me more about God because through watching you, through building with you, through seeing what you value, I get to see another side of God. And so I think relationships are valuable because they teach you about God, a side of God that you just wouldn't see if you didn't interact with others. I think, as you said, the ability to exchange, life would be terribly miserable if I had to do everything myself.
Absolutely.
Like, I have no problem being to myself, but I also have an awareness that I can't do everything by myself.
Yeah.
And so the quality of life that other people bring you, I think, is important to relationships as well because they actually help you get things done. And so that's just two things I think are valuable about relationships.
And I think what goes along with that, we were talking a lot as we were just, sitting down together, starting out about being introverted versus extroverted. And I think a kind of maybe a misrepresentation of introverts is that they don't value relationships.
Come on.
And I think introverts actually value relationships sometimes more because it's not a question of not wanting people or relationships in my life. I know for me, I want the depth. I get more drained by small talk. I get more drained by 100 shallow conversations than I do by something that offers depth. And so there's still this need for relationship, even though overall as an introvert, the more time I spend with people, it drains and I need alone time to decompress and recharge. That those relationships, I think, hold a different level of importance because I'm not getting an energy from people and from relationships, but there's a depth that I need in my life as an introvert. And so I value the relationships in my life that offer that kind of deep connection more so than a shallow connection.
Oh, that's good. Because as an extrovert, I can be the opposite. And sometimes I can have a lot of shallow relationships that I feel good about because I do derive energy from that. But I have to put in the extra work to make sure there are some depth in the relationships that are important in my life, and not just let them be surface, because I can consume myself with I just need to be around people. Like for me, I can go to a sporting event and I can pretty much make a friend pretty quick because we don't have to have the depth. And that can charge me, but But I find very quickly that I can be lonely even though I have a lot of people around me, and it fills my extroverted nature because there's no depth to that. And so I think, when you talk about relationships, Tabitha, what you said was really good in finding that depth too, because again, I think at the core, we are created images of Christ, and he is a relational God. And so I think the relationship component within us is going to be there, and we're going to need it. And we need the essence of teamwork and community around us.
Right. And I think that we all know there are dual sides to relationships, because we need relationships. We're created to live in community in the image of God, but also we know that there can be that dark side, that there can be relationships that are unhealthy and toxic and detrimental to our well-being and, like you said, our relationship in view of God. And then there can be relationships that are healthy. And so maybe let's take some time and talk about what makes a relationship a healthy, vibrant relationship versus the opposite.
When I think about the term relationship, it's directional. You know what I'm saying? And I think that if a relationship isn't mutual, right? If it isn't mutual, partner-minded, if it isn't taking you somewhere, and to me, the ultimate goal is maturity. You know what I'm saying? Maturing in our personal relationships, those value-based relationships. And I'm not saying that that's void of entertainment and things that are just fun.
Yeah.
Because that's valuable as well.
Absolutely.
That's valuable as well. But I think that the goal of relationships, or healthy ones, actually bring the best out of you. And it's a collaboration. It brings what I would call a healthy ecosystem. Like the air is fresh. Our conversations are fresh. We leave like refreshed and rejuvenated, and we cross-pollinated. So I think that those things are very healthy to relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that completely. And I think also sometimes we can trick ourselves into thinking that we have to have the same values in relationships to have a good relationship. And that's just not true. I need people that think a little bit different, and I need those healthy relationships that are going to pull the best out of me, but don't naturally think like I do. Because if I just surround myself with a bunch of yes people that are always going to agree with me, I don't think there's any depth or growth in that relationship. And again, it's not that the values have to be like extremely different. But I need people that are not necessarily thinking as high level and far as extroversion, or even, I know we keep using that word, but thinking about just the idea of, for me, I value teamwork. That's something that's really, really significant to me, but I don't necessarily need my best friend to value that same teamwork. They can have their own value, and we can have some disagreements and have conversations that are challenging to me, I think, at times, that help me be more well-rounded in that, and help me become a better version of myself. And I hope it's reciprocal. I hope I'm doing the same things that I'm pouring into them. And so I think, when you talk about healthy relationships, Antwain, I think you hit it right on at the beginning, that there has to be movement. There has to be direction to that relationship. If it's stagnant and neither one of you are progressing or becoming more aware of who you are or a better version of yourself, then you have to really assess, is that a healthy relationship, or is that just a good acquaintance that's in my life?
I think because we've been talking about like that need for love and acceptance, which is a need for belonging. We want to belong. And I read someone, I don't remember who it was a long time ago, and I'm old enough to not remember, but that they said that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. And that kind of like that hit, especially, as youth pastors for 20 years, we talk to students and we watch teenagers try so hard to fit in and to find and to try to fit in with different groups and different cliques. And it's all out of a need for belonging. But in a healthy relationship, it's not about fitting in, which I think goes with what you're saying, because we don't have to be the same.
Right.
We don't have to share 100% of the same values, like our own personal core values. We don't have to like all the exact same thing. Like, we can be different, unique, individual people. And I think the healthiest relationships are those that allow us to be authentically, genuinely ourselves. And yes, we're pushed toward growth and toward learning, but we don't have to change who we authentically are to feel like we fit in, because that's really what we're trying we don't want that. And I think that's why we find ourselves, when we do change ourselves for a relationship, whether it's a dating relationship, a marriage, a friendship, whatever level of relationship it is, when we're changing ourselves to feel like we belong, we end up with the opposite. And we feel so unsatisfied and so unfulfilled in that relationship because we're not being ourselves.
Wow.
And we can never belong if we're not being ourselves.
That is so good.
Absolutely.
Tracy, if you're hearing this, I thought that I would change myself for you, but based on just hearing what Tabitha said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to accept me the way that I am.
It'll be better for it. You and Tracy Ellis, you'll be better for it, Antwain.
right.
I'm here for you.
But you're absolutely right that the people don't understand the dynamics of knowing that, like, you have levels. You have levels to relationships. You know what I'm saying? Friendships, dating relationships, family relationships, and how we interact and exchange information and values might be different based on the level of those relationships. But I have found that what is a detriment to those relationships is if you have somebody that maybe has extreme trauma
Yeah.
or very high expectations, and it's very hard to find common ground, with those people, because oftentimes they're looking to get something instead of contribute,
Yeah.
to making a relationship, whatever one it is, actually work. So I found that what you said is important, because if you don't know yourself, have that awareness, then you could erode the quality of the relationships around you because you're looking to get something from them instead of contribute to them.
I think that's good.
That's really good. And something you said, with the idea of expectation, I believe Joyce Myers has said this on multiple occasions, but the biggest killer of relationships is unmet or unknown expectations, really is what the quote is. And I think that's such a significant thing, because I think oftentimes we go into relationships not with the mindset of what can I offer this person? How can I help them? Versus this mindset that I think, and I'm even at fault at this, is what am I going to get out of this? Like, what can they offer me? What can they give me? How are they going to, and I think it really sets us up, because then we create these expectations in our mind with our relationships of they should be doing this, they should respond this way. Right. Or even like you said earlier, I sent them a text, why are they not responding immediately in my text? Or I called and they didn't even answer for me, but I can see they read my text because I got the notification. And we have all this, just maybe discontent.
Yep.
Because we have these expectations built in our minds, but we never communicate them to the people that are close to us. And then when they don't live up to that expectation, we want to kill the relationship. We want to call it a failure, or they just don't accept me, or they don't love me, or I don't belong with this person. When it's like, no, you've never told them the expectation. And that goes both ways. I mean, in the relationship, you need to know the expectation that the other person has.
True.
As well. But oftentimes, even in my own life, I can find myself getting super frustrated. And then I'm like, wait, I never told you that this is how this should be. And then I have no right to be upset at that or to say this relationship isn't working, because it's not your fault. That's mine.
That's right.
Because I think some unhealthy relationships, like you said, lack a communication of expectations. And so when I haven't communicated my expectations, because we talk about this a lot, like within our own marriage and when we talk to and counsel other people, that if you're not communicating your expectation, you really don't have a right to be upset when someone's not meeting it. Like, we can't assume people are mind readers. But I think with that, it comes, and what is unhealthy is a sense of entitlement, that we feel like we're owed certain things in certain levels of relationship. And like you said, we're not willing to necessarily give anything, But I see a lot, I feel like in marriage, like we feel like we're entitled, and maybe it comes from culture, and like I write fiction stories. I love a good romance. I love a good rom-com, but we watch those things and we get a view of what we feel like marriage or friendship or dating or whatever it is should look like. And so now we feel like, well, because this movie made it look like this, that's what I'm entitled to. And that's what my expectations become based on, something that's not even based in reality.
That's right.
And then I don't communicate them with someone else, and I end up, like you said, I end up very discontent. And often, and there are times, like obviously in abusive situations, things like that, that this is not the case. But I think a lot of times our discontent in those moments is really because we're being selfish and don't realize it.
True that.
We're being entitled and don't realize it, and we want to blame the other person rather than going, what is it that I need to evaluate in myself in this relationship to make it better, rather than always expecting the other person to do something.
Yep. I 1,000% understand and agree with what you're saying, because I have found that in relationships that many people have values and they have standards, but oftentimes they go uncommunicated or agreed upon in a relationship. And because that agreement isn't there, I always tell people then that can't become an expectation. It can only be an expectation when that standard and that value has been agreed upon by both parties.
That's good.
Yeah.
And so if both parties have not agreed to that, then you don't have the right to make that an expectation, even if you think they might have the capability or the ability to understand what the dynamic is. Like, just because that person has the capability, the ability of that doesn't mean that they have to agree to those standards if there has not been an agreement.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm finding, like in relationships, as I'm doing a lot of these relationship talks, I'm finding that people feel like just because somebody has the ability to do something that they should do it, but they haven't agreed to it.
Yeah.
They never agreed to it. So
Yeah.
because there is no agreement, you can't have an expectation for somebody to fulfill that specific standard.
Man, that's
That's
so
good.
good. Yeah. I even see that in myself. Like, just sitting there thinking about that, and you just saying that, Antwain, just, revelation. There have been moments in my life that have really been I wouldn't say the destruction of relationships, but the crumbling of some really good relationships because of that very thing, that I've never had an agreement of the expectation.
That's right.
But it's like, oh, you should have just known that. And that's not fair.
It's not fair.
It's not fair, because
No.
I don't want somebody to do that to me.
That's right.
But how quick do I do? Well, you should have just known that's what I needed. That's what I expected.
Yep.
That's what I wanted. And because I didn't say it, it's your fault. No, that's my fault.
That's true.
Because we want people to be able to read our minds, but we don't want to have to read anybody else's mind. Like, you have to tell me the things that you want me to know, but you should know. I mean, the number of times I've had someone say, well, but they should know. I'm like, but should they? Because they haven't had your experience. Even if you've been married 40, 50 years, they haven't always had the same experience as you. So to say they should know, and maybe they should, I don't know. Maybe there are some things where, like, yeah, in a perfect world, they should realize it. You shouldn't have to say, hey, can you do this? But like, you can be mad because you have to say it, or you can say it and get the help that you need. I remember, like, when our kids were little and like in diapers and potty training, there was one day I was so mad at Brian. I was so mad at you because I just wanted help. Like, he's sitting there, I'm trying to change a diaper, help another kid go to the bathroom. Like, there's all this stuff going on. And I'm like, why aren't you helping me? But I never said, hey, can you help me? Because in my mind it was, well, he's there, like, he's their parent too. Like, he helped make them. I shouldn't have to say, hey, can you help me do this? I shouldn't have to say it. He should just know. He should be proactive. And again, at the end of the day, whether he should or shouldn't is beside the point. I'm allowing myself to get angry and even a little bitter and resentful, when instead because I don't feel like I should have to say, will you help me? Will you do this?
Yeah.
Whereas if I would just go, hey, will you do this? He would have gladly done it. And we would have saved both of ourselves probably the argument that we had 10 minutes later, because I'm sure that we had one because I was angry and I'm sure I said stuff and was sassy. But I think that it's such an easy, simple thing, But when we're in the middle of it, we don't see it.
That's right.
We don't see how our own expectations, our own sense of entitlement, our own uncommunicated standards are affecting, the way that we're viewing another person.
You don't want to know what's funny to me? I was like, that we have stoplights for adults. We have paint in the middle of the road, yellow paint, red paint, and all of that in the middle of the road for adults. Like, it's adults that don't follow rules. We have a red, green, and yellow stoplight that tells you, you know what, you probably should stop right here. Or a speed limit that says, hey, you know what, you probably shouldn't speed too fast right. Like, that's why I always make the statement that, listen, there are things that you think that people should know that they just don't know or they just don't do.
Yeah.
And so we should do ourselves, like, don't do yourself a disservice by being frustrated, by just simply speaking up and then making sure that that person understands and is acknowledged that this is something that they agree to. Then that's the only way you can really hold them accountable, because there's been an acknowledgement from that person that they agree to that standard.
That's so good. And I think, one of the things that I'm learning, because have struggled with this at times, is this notion of, in those conversations to get to the agreement, there is that uncomfortable moment where you just have to have the conversation. And it doesn't matter what type of relationship it is, but it's having those 15-minute, 30-minute uncomfortable conversations to get to that place where the expectation, the agreement. Josh, our pastor, often says, I'd rather take 15 minutes and be uncomfortable in a conversation with you than spend, 3-4 years living in an uncomfortableness every time we're together.
Preach.
Because I'm unwilling to have that conversation. And I think that happens in marriages. I think that happens in relationships in general, is there are things that we feel, but because they're uncomfortable to talk about, or we're scared that I may hurt this person's feelings if I talk about them or bring this up, we don't have that, but we're really eroding the foundation of the relationship by not having those conversations. And we just continue to live distant from one another because we never can cross that boundary or that border to really begin to build a healthy relationship, because healthy relationships have those conversations as a part of it. I mean, even in our marriage, every so often, and it's not scheduled, it's not like we sit down and go every 2 months, we're going to have this conversation, but we find times where we just go to dinner together and we sit down and go, hey, tell me what I'm doing well. Tell me what I'm not doing well in our marriage right now. Because it's important. And I think in relationships, especially relationships that are ongoing, it's okay to have those conversations with people to say, hey, our relationships is important to me. So what am I doing well? What haven't I done well? Because again, it comes back to that agreement. I think in those conversations, the agreement gets surfaced and it's put right there. And then there's no more guesswork to it. I know what I need to do. And so now, our kids aren't in diapers anymore, but I know I have to play a part. I'm not a default parent, but I still have to play my part in that.
I'm totally the default parent. But yeah, I think, because that's how boundaries are set, right? Like they're set, like we all have boundaries in our relation. Like we all have boundaries that we know if someone crosses it, we feel uncomfortable. We feel hurt. We feel unsafe, depending on the boundary and the level of it. And those kind of conversations are where we communicate those boundaries. And maybe you're not going, hey, this is my boundary. But you're saying the things, hey, I'm asking you, is there something that I do well? Is there something that's frustrating you? And then when they answer that question, that's signaling an emotional boundary, a physical boundary, whatever it is.
I struggled with this early, especially in my high school years, early college years. And if I'm completely honest, even as an adult, I still at times struggle with this because I want people to like me so much that I naturally morph myself or put a facade on, if you will, to connect with them, and they don't really get to see me. And so I've learned that I have to be authentic even in risking relationships with people. Be who I am the moment that I meet people if I'm going to find healthy relationships.
Yes. And this is good.
And I think that goes to, because I think it's harder to risk when we've been hurt. Because we talked about what does a healthy relationship look like. And I think communication and being willing to give, pouring into it, understanding that we're moving in a direction, but what do we do when we've been hurt? We're in a relationship that's hurting. We're in a relationship that's not healthy. Like, how do we move forward from that so that we don't let maybe a toxic relationship be something that affects everything else moving forward?
I've been on this journey to help people understand the art of communication. And there's one missing element that I don't hear talked about enough as it pertains to communication, and that's the art of interpretation. And I found that interpretation only is balanced when the person has a commitment to personal maturity and growth. This is strange, but I found that when somebody is on this journey to say, look, I want to be a better person and I want to mature, and I've had difficulties in life or difficulty in relationships, difficulty in my marriage and whatever, but I want to be better, and I don't want to walk around with just like resentment and guilt, and like they're really doing that hard work. I found that what they go to work on is their interpretation, that I don't read too deeply into things, or I seek to understand before I seek to be understood.
That's
like
good.
you start to take yourself through like posture. Like when somebody's saying something and you're thinking about how I'm sitting and my lead-ins. You know, am I saying condescending things, or am I leaving the conversation open so that you can continue to like talk and we can like get to the solution? It's like, so I think that when people have been through very traumatic, unhealthy circumstances, I think the goal is to work on personal development and to grow in your communication. But I think also the impact that it will have on your interpretation of things, that you won't take things so personal.
That's really good.
You
That's
will
good.
really seek to understand and to learn and to extract, opposed to thinking that everything is an attack against you.
I think that's good, because we can so easily start to see every other relationship, or really everything, through the lens of our trauma, through the lens of our pain, through the lens of our hurt. And our hurt and pain and trauma is valid. It's something that happened. We have to deal with it. We have to find healing from that. But I think we can become intentional. It's a journey. It's a process. A lot of Jesus probably helps to choose to say, this is something that happened to me in a relationship, but that doesn't mean every relationship is going to do the same thing.
That's right.
And so I'm going to do the personal work of not looking through that lens at every other relationship before me. And hopefully the people on the other side will have the grace for you to say, I know that you've been hurt. I know that you've experienced trauma. And so I'm going to have grace and patience, because it's hard to not look through the lens of our pain.
Very much
it's
so.
super hard.
Yeah, and again, I love that, because I think it's tremendous insight there. And I think it leads to the authenticity piece as well. I think you have to, when you're talking about self-evaluation and thinking about growing in your interpretation and even your communication, you have to find your voice. And part of your voice now is going to stem from the trauma that you've been a part of. And that's not to say carry that with you for the rest of your life, but understand that that's a significant part of who you are. And now it's going to be a significant part of any relationship that you go into. And so not being ashamed or embarrassed by that. And again, I'm not saying you just, from the moment you meet somebody, you flood them with every information and trauma that you've ever had in your life. But it's knowing that about yourself and being okay to, in those moments, say, hey, look, I'm having a hard time here. And so I need you to give me a little bit of space, because I've got to figure this out for myself and what it looks like, because I'm starting to put some things on you that's just not fair.
Yeah.
I think that's why forgiveness is so important. Like true forgiveness, where we understand that forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for us. Because when I can walk the journey of forgiveness, because it's a process, it's not like a switch that we flip. But when I walk that, then, yeah, like you said, any trauma or hurt or brokenness that I've had and that I'm carrying with me, it's not going to disappear. It's never going to be like that didn't happen. But it's not becoming this thing that poisons the well of every other relationship. Absolutely. Or even of my own spirit, because I'm finding healing through forgiveness. And again, and forgiveness isn't saying what happened to me was okay, that or anything like that. It's just saying I am going to choose to not allow what this person did to continue to hurt me into my future.
Yeah. Or what, not just what a person did to you, but what you did not get from.
That's good.
You know what I'm saying? From a
Absolutely.
relationship too, because I have found that there are many people that come to relationships with very high expectations because they were robbed of or didn't receive particular things in a relationship. And so they make those things their standards.
Yeah.
See, this is why I always talk about that agreement standpoint, because
Absolutely.
it's like, yo, mom didn't give that to you. Dad didn't give that to you. Somebody else didn't give that to you. And then somebody goes, well, you know what? To be in a relationship with me because they didn't give it to me, this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
And then the person is like, well,
I'm not signing up
I
for
didn't
that.
sign up for that. I may not even know how to even give you that.
Yeah.
And it is not my responsibility to fill the void.
That's good.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what we're asking for. We're saying to people, like, you have to realize that relationships require a certain level of personal maturity and abilities. That I think that many people are driven by their attractions or what they like about a person instead of assessing their own abilities and say, do I even have the capability for a relationship?
That's really good.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think, even thinking about that term, I think sometimes we go into relationships going, well, you're going to make me grow.
Right.
Right.
Or I like you, and that's good enough.
Yeah, you're gonna do this for
Right.
me. And it's like, no, you gotta do the work.
Right.
I'm just here to help move you forward, not do the work for you.
Yep. I love that in Genesis that Eve is called a helpmeet and not a helpmate. The word is M-E-E-T.
Yeah.
We have described her as an M-A-T-E.
That's
Meaning
good.
is totally different. Don't even get me started.
I was like, so you have to understand that she has specific capabilities and abilities
Yeah.
to help with the assignment.
Absolutely.
Mate is for the person. Meet is for the assignment.
Wow.
That's good. Because
Yeah.
that term doesn't refer to like what we think of
That's
as
right.
in a romantic marriage relationship. It refers to military strategy, to partnership, strategic partnership.
Come on.
And that's so good because again, we put expectations on people. We put standards on people. And I like what you said, that we want someone else to fill a void in us that they cannot fill.
That's right.
If you didn't have healthy parental relationships, your marriage partner, your friends cannot give you that. They can't. Like, it's not possible for them to be a replacement for that. I mean, can you find love and acceptance and belonging that maybe you didn't get from other relationships? Sure, but we have to be careful to not say, well, like, I don't want my spouse to fill a dad void in my life. That's weird and unhealthy. Like, that's not, right? Like, and I don't want my friends to feel that way. I mean, we have lots of people in our lives that, like, we have people in our lives that are spiritual mothers, that are spiritual
Right.
fathers, that have that, I would say, vibe. We have people that, we've done youth ministry for 20 years, and we have had kids that have had dysfunctional homes that I'm sure looked at us as a spiritual mother, as a spiritual father. It's not that they couldn't get part of that they couldn't get some piece of that, but you can't give that to other people. And I think it even goes to, because no other person on this planet is meant to fill a void in your life. That's not what relationships are for. And one of our mentors, Jeannie Mayo, would always say that if you need the relationship, and she was talking about dating, but I think it can be true in anything. If you need it, like you need it to feel whole, to feel complete, to feel fulfilled, then you should back away from it. Like if you need it, then it's not the right time for it. Because ultimately, the only thing that completes us, the only thing that fulfills us is our relationship with God. And anytime we start to look for that in other people, be it out of hurt and trauma, because we're expecting someone else and some other relationship to heal us. Like, yeah, we can find healing in community, but not because the other person has the power to heal us.
That's right.
And so I think it's putting relationships in their proper place.
Absolutely.
That they're important. They are vital. Being in community, having other people that we can find love and acceptance and belonging with is so impactful and such a huge part of how God created us and wired us. But ultimately, my personal fulfillment, my completeness, my wholeness is only found in Him. Mm-hmm. And so making sure that I keep like those relationships in the right perspective.
Yeah, that's really good. And that made me think too of something that we've often talked about is just this idea of loneliness. And I think sometimes we combat loneliness with relationships, and that's not healthy. Because I think there's health in loneliness because it forces you to be internal. It forces you to think. And sometimes we think, well, I'm feeling lonely, so I just need to go find somebody to fill that void or that gap in my life. And it becomes, we've already set the stage for such an unhealthy relationship because that person isn't going to fill the loneliness gap that's there. Like I can be in great relationships with a lot of people and still have moments in my life where I'm lonely. I feel distant from everybody. And to me, that should be an indication that there needs to be some internal work that needs to be done in my life, that I need to get alone with Jesus and find out really what's going on internally within me. Or, you know, for some people, it's I need to maybe seek out some counseling, seek out some, direction in my life to find out what's going on with me and not look for a relationship to fill that loneliness gap. Wow. And so it points to, hey, do some work. Don't just jump into these relationships to belong, to feel accepted, to feel loved. If you're feeling lonely, that's an indication of, hey, do some self-evaluation, find out where that's coming from. Don't just go, hey, random stranger on the street, you want to hang out with me because you're going to fill that gap for me. But that's what sometimes I think we treat it like. It's just the next person that walks in the room, they're going to be the person that fills that gap for me. And it's like you get into the relationship and you're like, they're great, but I still feel the same.
That's so good.
Because like you said, loneliness becomes the reason for the relationship. If I don't want to be lonely. And we say this to students all the time, loneliness is a hungry need. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily bad. Like we view to feel lonely as this horrible thing that we have to run from. Like it's the scary monster in the movie. Like that's the worst thing that you can be is lonely. But aloneness can be very healthy and can be very good because it does cause us to look to God and to look within ourselves and find the fulfillment and wholeness we need in Him. But loneliness is very hungry. And when you start to feed it, it only wants more and it only wants more. And if you go into a relationship because you don't want to be alone, like you're going to be so needy and unhealthy. And then that person's not going to be enough. And so you're going to look for someone else who can be, because that it's so hungry and it just gets bigger and hungrier the more you try and feed it the wrong thing. That's
powerful. Man, I'm over here mind blown. I've never juxtaposed those two, so that's really great because I guess what you're saying is that aloneness causes introspection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if used for personal development, it makes you better in relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's really great.
I don't think there's anything wrong with saying I'm lonely. I would like to have a relationship. Mm-hmm. I would like to find someone to spend I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, as long as we're keeping it in the perspective of I'm not going to jump into a relationship solely to fulfill, to feed that need. Yeah, I can have that. There's nothing wrong with the desire for relationships. And we all feel lonely sometimes and we want other people, but it's having the maturity to say, I'm going to sit back and like look at myself And why do I feel this way? What am I really looking for that I think another person can offer me? Because if I just jump in so that I don't feel lonely anymore, I'm probably going to end up with something shallow and unhealthy.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, too, with that, when you jump in because of loneliness, then just like fear causes us to do a lot of things we would say we would never do.
Right.
I think loneliness is the same way, because loneliness becomes such a big void to fill that when somebody else, especially if it's an unhealthy relationship, asks us to do certain things, we're just like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm going to do it because I need to keep this relationship so I don't feel lonely.
Yeah.
And that just, it becomes a dangerous game. Because like you said, it's one of those that I don't care how many people you put in your life, if it's not dealt with, if it's not worked on, because again, we're all going to feel it.
Yeah.
At various points in our lives, stronger in moments and in seasons than others. But if we're not dealing with it in a healthy manner, what it becomes is it becomes that bigger dog within inside of us that's always craving something more. And we will do some very unhealthy things in our life to fill that.
This is why I just go to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
Nap time.
That's right. Shutting the world down for a minute.
Yeah. But I think that's so good because any need that is a hungry need, if we're not careful in how we feed it, it only gets hungrier. It only gets worse. It only gets unhealthier in our lives. I feel like this has been really good chat about relationships, guys.
This has been fantastic.
I feel like we've covered so much in-depth stuff. A lot of people are going to find healing in this. They're going to move forward. But as we kind of maybe wrap up, I would love to just offer something practical that people can take home. So what's maybe one thing someone can do today, this week, this month, that can help them to be intentional about being healthy in relationships or building healthy relationships? So what's a practical maybe step that someone can take?
Man, that's so good.
I'll say the comment that I made earlier. Seek to be a person that understands more than wanting to be understood. And this is the art of being a listener.
Yeah.
And an extractionist. That if I'm not proficient in something or good in something, I will get around others and I will just sit and listen. And I will seek to understand their perspective and vantage point and look into what they're saying more, opposed to me feeling like I have to add something to the conversation or whatever. And so if you're a person that's like, hey, I want to get better at relationships, then one of the most critical parts of relationships is for people to feel valued by you.
Absolutely.
They feel valued in your presence. And so I would be a person that seeks to understand others.
That's so good.
That's good.
Yeah, I think that's paramount. Number one, I would agree with that. If you're going to start somewhere, start right there. I think the second component to that would then just be really, take some chances. And what I mean by that is be authentically you and engage with some people in your life. Find out where they are. I think listening to people really will allow you to connect with them on a greater level. Like I said, I've been in this coaching journey, and one of the biggest things that they say in that relationship when you're building trust, building health with people is it's 80-20 rule. They do 80% of the talking, you do 20%. So you're listening because you're listening for even the nonverbal cues. You're watching their, how they are feeling about a moment. Because some of the best ways to build relationships is just seeing where a person is and being able to embrace them in that moment, not cast judgment, not say, hey, Antwain, you like dark humor, man. I think we just can't go that route. No, it's just saying, what, that's a part of who he is.
And accept it.
I love it about him. I love it about him because I wouldn't have pegged that. But now it's something for me to know, and I know how to connect. I know how to, initiate a deeper relationship because I've taken the time to listen and learn more about who he is. But that takes risk because it's not always going to be easy or comfortable because I think naturally, at least for me, it's much easier to talk about what I like than to listen and hear what other people are about.
That's really good.
I think that's good. And I think both things that you said require such a level of selflessness that in that relationship, whatever it is, being willing to put the other person first. Because to sit back and listen and just try and understand the other person means I may not be understood. Mm-hmm. And I have to be a little bit okay with that in certain moments, to take those risks and put ourselves out there to really get to know someone else, I think requires, again, that a little bit I set myself on a back burner. Not in a way that I'm a doormat, not in a way that I'm being taken advantage of, and not in a way that my needs never get met. But I don't approach relationships, I think we said it early on, to get something. It's not what I get out of it so much as what I can pour into, what I can nurture. I like that better. We don't really pour into people, Jesus does, but what I can nurture and water in someone else. And so I think part of that is sitting back and taking time for self-assessment. I think a spiritual discipline that often gets overlooked when we talk about reading our Bibles and prayer and worship is self-assessment. But how many times does the Bible say examine yourselves? And so taking the time to say, where am I? What is it that I want? What is it that I think I need from this relationship? What is it that I really need? How am I changing myself to try and fit into this relationship when I could just authentically be myself? Where am I being, just taking that time of self-assessment, maybe even journaling about it a little bit, because sometimes when we write those things down, it just opens a floodgate of thoughts and emotions that get some stuff out of us. But to set that baseline so that as we move forward and listen to people and put ourselves out there as authentically, genuinely who we are, we'll maybe have a little bit more of a foundation to do that.
Absolutely.
So this has been good. Any final thoughts? I would love, Antwain, can you tell us how we can connect with you on social media or online?
Sure. You can find me at Antwain Jackson on all socials. You can find me at antwainjackson.org. And you can also find my book, The Creative Leader, on Amazon.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, go check out the book.
Check out the book.
I'm going to plug for him because he won't. So I'm going to say it's very worth it.
It's very good.
He's a quality dude.
Well,
I'll pay you for it later.
Relationships aren't supposed to be transactional, guys. So thanks so much for talking with us today.
Okay, you guys, was that not an awesome conversation? I'm an introverted person who loves people, so I really appreciated the insight they brought about how to develop healthy expectations and also how to communicate those things that we need with our people. I hope it encouraged you to, and maybe even equipped you to think through where you're at with your friends, your family, or your marriage, so you can continue to cultivate health in your own relationships. They are so important. Well, if you enjoyed this episode, would you mind leaving a review and sharing it on social media? Our hope is that we can bring relevant content that inspires each listener to grow in the areas that really matter in our lives. Thank you so much for listening, and be on the lookout for the next episode as we continue to discover what matters most.